Good evening, and we are so glad you have joined us. Continuing our theme of activities focusing on our planet, our environment, and our climate, leading up to COP26, we are delighted to host Jayantha Wijesingha this evening. This November, the United Kingdom will host the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland. This is an event many believe to be the world's last best chance to get runaway climate change under control. For nearly 3 decades, the UN has been bringing together almost every country on Earth for global climate summits called COPs, Conference of the Parties. And in that time, climate change has gone from being a fringe issue to a global priority. The Climate Connection brings people around the world together to meet the challenges of climate change through arts and culture, education, and the English language. Change can only happen when all of us, and especially young people, are actively involved, collaborating and innovating across borders and generations. Climate change is the greatest risk facing us all. Our guest today will talk to us about some critical aspects of our lives: climate change, global warming, extreme weather events, and also about how we could make a change for our climate. It is a lot to discuss, and we hope that today's program and Jayantha's presentation will be the start of your awareness and action. Jayantha Wijesingha is a climate champion, a branding professional cum marketer turned conservationist. With over 12 years' experience in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, working on climate change, environmental policy planning, conservation strategy planning, ecosystem restoration, and sustainable development. He is the Chief Coordinator of Rainforest Protectors of Sri Lanka, Chief Coordinator of Rainforest Protectors Trust, and an advisor to many local and district level environment organizations. Jayantha, welcome to this session hosted by the British Council as part of an extended series leading up to COP26. Thank you for being here with us.
Good evening to Mrinali and good evening to British Council and everyone else joined here. And thank you so much for inviting me for these fabulous awareness sessions that the British Council is organizing. And I'm proud to be a part of this whole effort of yours.
Yes. And before Jayantha begins, I want to say, please put your questions and comments in the chat because Jayantha will be happy to take them up once his presentation is over. So it's all yours, Jayantha. Please do engage and ask Jayantha all the questions and say to him what you want to say in the chat section. Jayantha, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me begin with just a little background to the Environment Day of 2021 and how timely this conversation is, because this time the theme of the Environment Day was ecosystem restoration. Now, ecosystem restoration is one of the major ways in which we can curtail and mitigate and probably reverse some of the climate change impacts. So on that backdrop, it was very interesting to be a part of this conversation on climate change, how it affects us, and what can we as citizens, as companies, as governments could do to mitigate its significant and severe consequences that are predicted to happen if we continue the way it is. So let me begin with that, my presentation. I hope everyone can see my screen now. Can someone confirm, if you don't mind?
We can't see your presentation yet. Can you hear me, Jayantha? We can't see it yet. It's just come up. It's fine.
Right. Okay. So I will begin with this conversation with a statement Barack Obama made on the COP15, where he said, "No challenge poses a greater threat to future generations than climate change." Now, if we look at the history of the study of climate change, and the climate change has it's actually several centuries old. Although we think it's a term that came into effect in 1960s, whereas even in Sri Lanka, in the 800s, latter part of 800s, there was a discussion to declare Knuckles Conservation Area, currently the Knuckles Conservation Area, as world's first climate reserve by the British. So the discussion on climate change is not something that happened in the 1900s. It is in fact much older, although as we all of us know, the climate change is severely accelerated due to the industrial revolution and the developments thereafter. So when Barack Obama and all the other world leaders in COP15 clearly said in 2015 at Paris that there is no greater threat than climate change to the entire world, we will just dig a little into the topic of climate change, global warming, and understand whether what they're saying is actually true or not. Let's begin with the topic, the global warming. We cannot talk about climate change without speaking about global warming. What is global warming? Now, in simple terms, every one of us know global warming is the temperature increase in the atmosphere. That's the simplest term. But with the global warming, a warming world, we have heard a lot of things. We have heard the glaciers are melting, we have heard the temperature increasing, and then we have heard the ocean temperature is increasing, and we have heard various discussions such as sea level rise, and some of the islands might get submerged in time to come, and different things. So we have to really look at the topic of global warming and the topic of climate change and its impact and how it will impact, and understand how the global warming happens. Now, global warming is a scenario which is very important, and it's also the very reason why we have life on Earth. The problem, though, is that global warming is not really something very bad, but excessive warming is very bad, because some of the heat that comes into the Earth must stay in our atmosphere. It can't completely go out. The sun, the energy the sun brings in, we can't let the entire thing go. But that is why we have our atmosphere, where it traps a certain amount of heat and a certain amount of radiation, and therefore keeping our planet in the state as it is, which helps the life to form. And you might have seen, I can show you different models of greenhouse effect, how this entire process is called greenhouse effect, and how it happens with the ozone layer in place, and how it traps some of the heat, and how it reflects some of it and keeps us with the right temperature, so that agriculture, air composition, and the marine environment, and balance of the oxygen and carbon dioxide and all the other air gases rather is balanced. So it's very important to understand this trapping process. Now, this is how some of these greenhouse gases, which we will be speaking of separately, what these gases are, is trapped by our atmosphere. And carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrous oxide, and plenty of other greenhouse gases are basically trapped in this atmosphere. And when the sun ray comes, this radiation is reflected by the earth and by the atmosphere with the ozone layer, and it basically create an environment, a very balanced, very scientifically balanced environment for life forms to begin in this planet. And as we all of us, as all of us know, only the planet basically is home for living beings, as far as the science has so far found. So this trapping process, when the sunlight enters the planet and it gets reflected, and if you don't have enough what do you call a proper balanced atmosphere to control this particular trapping process and the reflection process, is where the earth starting to warm up, and the entire sunlight that comes sometimes does not get reflect, and it basically stays within the planet itself, and it basically warms up the whole process, whole planet, and creating a new set of problems, creating an imbalance of the planet's atmosphere. And you might have heard about ozone. Now, ozone, where we live on the planet, for us, it's not a good gas in terms of ozone as a greenhouse gas. If we have it in a like background too much, it can be detrimental. But ozone in the ozone layer in the atmosphere is very important, and therefore the balance of the ozone layer is very important in the atmosphere to keep our planet in the right temperature. Now, when the ozone layer deplete, there are various consequences are felt. You can have UV, direct UV radiation coming, and with that various illnesses. We will be speaking about this more into depth in a little bit, but therefore protecting our ozone layer is one of the important things, and that is why we will be speaking of Kyoto Protocol came into effect. And in fact, in this world, some of the best implemented protocols, one of the best implemented protocol is Kyoto Protocol, through which we were able to cut down immensely heavily on the CFC, chlorofluorocarbon, and some of the other gases that are detrimental to the ozone layer's existence. And now there's a direct relationship between the ozone layer depletion and the climate change, and that is here I won't be basically explaining everything in detail. You can basically have a little look at the presentation and understand some of the things. We will be explaining these through graphics, and as well as some of the infographics as well. Now, therefore, ozone, the ozone balance of the ozone and the climate change has a direct impact, and therefore we need to have the optimum balance of the ozone in our atmosphere, and therefore ozone becomes one of the key gases that basically helps the greenhouse effect, and also in order to balance the global warming, in order to avoid global warming, excessive global warming, and to keep it on the optimum balance. And we need to also understand the differences when we speak of certain we speak of climate change, and often something that we figured out is that people mistake weather for climate. Now, weather and climate is significantly two different things. Climate is very long term, and actually weather is mostly impacted because of climate, and weather is very short term, and it's basically for a limited area. And of course we have when it comes to climate, we have microclimates where we will be speaking of small geographies. That's a different story, but once again, microclimate and weather are also two different things. climate is long-term, wide area, seasonal changes that be measured over a long period of time, and based on that only climate data is analyzed. Weather data, as opposed to that, is very short term, and it can change rapidly, and you can't depend on weather data for a climate assessment over a long-term assessment of how things have changed. Now, the climate change can happen due to natural causes, how the Earth is rotating around the sun, and how some of the natural occurrences such as volcanoes and other natural causes can also affect the climate change. But mostly we are speaking of man-made climate change. We're not talking about the natural causes, because for the last 800,000 years, mark my word, for the last 800,000 years, we haven't seen a temperature increase in the planet just like what happens today, and that is not a natural cause. This is a man-made cause, and we will be speaking of what are the man-made causes in detail in a little bit. And there are, like I mentioned, there are abiotic factors and biotic factors. I've mentioned it here separately. You can have a little look. I mentioned some of them earlier. Biotic factors are very important. It is transpiration, respiration, and photosynthesis, decomposition, and plenty of other factors basically affecting the climate. And the impact of greenhouse gases, like I mentioned, greenhouse gases is not something very bad. Greenhouse gases are something very good, but you need to ensure that you maintain the right balance of greenhouse gases. If that doesn't happen, now you can see on your left, if planets with very little greenhouse gas effect are either cold or are either too warm. Mainly it is too cold during the night and too warm during the daytime. So this is the impact of greenhouse gases, and we have our Earth with just the right balance for now. Like I mentioned, just for the moment anyway, we would know, and in fact even at this moment we speak, we see that there is a significant change in the atmosphere, and that has basically impacted the climate already immensely. So we will be moving on to the greenhouse gases, as to what are some types of greenhouse gases. We have carbon dioxide, then we have water vapor, we have methane, we have ozone, we have nitrous oxide, we have chlorofluorocarbons, we have sulfur dioxide, we have plenty of other greenhouse gases which actually occurs in the Earth's atmosphere. And we will be speaking of these, how they are formed in a little bit, how they are basically increasing in the planet in a little bit. Now, like I mentioned, increase of carbon dioxide, you might have seen hundreds of, if not thousands of graphs like this when anyone speaks of climate change, and these are common graphs, so I wouldn't be explaining this. Like I mentioned methane. Methane is a natural gas, but methane is one of the dangerous gases as well. Methane is actually accounting roughly about 30% of the global warming. So methane therefore is very deadly. And we have nitrous oxide, occurs in agriculture and livestock. Methane occurs in livestock as well, and in agriculture as well. And then of course ozone. Ozone, like I mentioned, is something very important, but it is very dangerous if that is commonly available in the usual composition of the gases. Now the greenhouse gas effect is impacting in different ways. This this image, or if this particular picture shows you as to how it basically impacts our environment. And human impacted greenhouse gas increase in the atmosphere, and its impact on the entire environment is felt all around the world. And this is how basically global warming increases climate change, and how it basically impacts the whole system. If you talk about agriculture, and if we talk about food security, we talk about forests, and we talk about natural disasters, and we talk about climate refugees, and we talk about economic losses, and many other things happens due to climate change. But very famous, one of the few famous topics are melting of glaciers and polar bears. You would have seen this almost in every climate change related presentation. You will see the ice cap loss in Greenland, Antarctica, and this is very common therefore. And importantly, you have to look at how these glacier losses, in fact, how much of ice caps we have lost in this century alone. Now, if you look at this Agassiz Glacier in Montana in 1913, looked completely covered, and in 2005, it is almost completely gone. And also, Pasteur's Glacier in Austria have faced the same fate. In 1875, it looked completely covered with ice, and in 2004, you only have few left in the top of the mountain. So now there was some research done, mathematical models used to analyze how much of ice cap we have lost, and in fact, you find these images clearly shows the amount of ice we have lost during the recent past. It's amounting to 1.61 million square miles of ice we have lost in the picture mentioned in the showed in the middle. And I wonder if you have seen Chasing Ice. Chasing Ice is a good documentary. I suggest everyone should have a look at this documentary because it is very nicely done. And this person basically photographing how these ice caps are lost over time using automated imagery tools, and as well as manual photography. That's very important. And what would the world look like if all the ice is melted? Now, this is something very important. Now, if you look at Sri Lanka, this is unfortunately very small in the picture, but if you see, most of the coastal zone of Sri Lanka will also be submerged if we lose the entire ice cap in the world. That includes Himalayas to all these Alps, to all these ice caps that we have. If we lose them, we will some of our low-lying areas in the coastal zone will be completely gone. You can see these models in the internet. There are various models that scientific models and papers that have put up estimating the total loss of ice cap, how many cities and how many countries, islands will get submerged at this rate. So there are predictions. If we continue the same global warming patterns, and if we increase up temperature from 1.5 degree to 4% decrease, and our ocean levels will rise from 1 foot to 1 to 8 feet by 2100. So it is our responsibility we will be speaking of as to how globally, in partnership, can keep this temperature rise down to below 1.5. Initially it was 2%, but now it has to be kept under 1.5. Melting of glaciers. Now, this has been seen once again. If you see Chasing Ice, you will see how much of ice caps are collapsing every single day, every moment in the Arctic area due to climate change. And ocean acidification is another impact of climate change, which everybody should be aware of. Now, we need to know ocean is our biggest ecosystem. something we always speak of forest degradation, we speak of deforestation, we speak of cutting down trees, but we seldom give the due recognition to oceans, because oceans actually not only absorbs carbon, it also emits oxygen. So uh, ocean is the biggest ecosystem we have in the planet. So therefore the healthy oceans is very important for everything from food security to transportation to climate regulation to everything. So but however, as we know, oceans basically swallow roughly about 30% of carbon dioxide that we emit. And by the increase of carbon dioxide content in the atmosphere, the ocean starts taking too much of carbon dioxide, and what happens with that is something called the ocean acidification. And with ocean acidification, a lot of marine animals, marine biodiversity is impacted, especially with the marine life with shells, like we speak of prawns, we speak of various other, even the corals are depleting at a greater rate due to ocean acidification. Now, these are some of the images of the impact of ocean acidification. Now, we know as kids, we used to go and see Hikkadu corals. We used to go to Mirissa. We used to go to various different areas in the Trinco. In different areas, we could see beautiful corals. But today, hardly any coral is colorful, and they are basically dead corals, and we have to start different campaigns to replant corals. They are not growing naturally. All are because of the ocean acidification. And also increased droughts. Now, these are the big impacts of climate change. The bushfires are raging all across American region, the Australia, and we have massive bushfires in Amazon. These are not actually natural bushfires, but man-made, but actually contributed because of the prolonged droughts in the Amazon region as well. So Amazon had a very bad time during the 2019 and 2020, and we hope that the situation will be ease out in the future. Hopefully, if the government does not promote soya cultivation and other land policies that are promoting the decimation of Amazon, because Amazon is absorbing so much of carbon. In fact, recently there were news that Amazon is no longer a carbon sink, which is very worrying for us, something we as citizens, world citizens, global citizens should be very wary of and very afraid of to a great extent. And various cyclones, various floods, droughts, you would have noticed. Let's talk a little about droughts. Now, in Sri Lanka during 2017 and 2018, if I'm not mistaken, there were 4 seasons that the farmers could not cultivate. In Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa, Puttalam, and even Hambantota, some of these areas, Ampara, these areas could not be cultivated, and we've had rice prices skyrocketing, we had coconut prices skyrocketing, and because the harvest was coming down drastically, and all these tanks, reservoirs were getting dried up, and we also had an energy crisis. So these are all the impacts that we have because of the climate change. And impact on biodiversity we will be speaking of, impact on human we'll be speaking of. I will not go into detail right now. And there are some of the scientific information that will be very important in terms of where the glaciers are melting, where the warming has increased, where the heat waves are, where the spread of diseases due to climate change, where the coral reefs are bleaching. All of these have been mapped internationally, and pretty much every country, pretty much every marine territory is mapped to see the impacts of climate change. You would have seen some of the lakes basically dying, depleting to great extent. Now, when I was a kid, I used to learn Lake Titicaca and Lake Chad as one of the biggest lakes in the world. But today, if you go and check the fate of Lake Titicaca and Lake Chad, you will see the real impact of climate change, how their area is shrunk, and how the limited area these lakes are distributed currently. And coastal erosion is another big issue, and then inundation of coastal areas, which we see often in the down south. We find the waves are, the waves are passing the main Gold Colombo road and going to the other side, which was not a natural occurrence earlier, but it's happening very frequently now. But this time frame, we might not see the accelerated changes any faster, but definitely there will be greater consequences in the future. And obviously additional costs, these are something that we don't basically take into account. We have had plenty of beach nourishment projects due to coastal erosion. We have had plenty of barriers, how do we call, breakwaters put to control coastal erosion. Now these are all natural resources resourced from the land, the rocks and the granite mining. Complete entire mountains have to come down for granite mining, and that is being dumped at the coastal areas to protect the coastal areas. And this is basically impacting our land and both coastal areas. And you would have seen the landslides. If you remember Aranayaka landslide, that's a massive landslide. This is not a local example, but the Aranayaka landslide is one of the easiest example. And then you have the example of in Matugama, there is another great example. You had one in Deniaya. At least 20 people died on that particular landslide. So these natural disasters are occurring much faster because of prolonged drought and heavy rains during a short span of time. And the rain we used to receive spread across the year, sometimes we receive it in a week or in a matter of days, and therefore plenty of natural disasters are occurring. And depletion of coral we spoke of, and therefore coral is home for a lot of marine biodiversity, and when the coral are depleted, the marine biodiversity is also lost. And we will be speaking of air quality. Now the air quality and the air pollution is a big problem. Even in Kandy, we have a big air pollution problem, and a lot of school kids have asthma and other different diseases due to air pollution. And in China alone, roughly about 1 million people die out of air pollution. 1 million people. In India, more than 300,000 people die out of air pollution. So in my opinion, air pollution is as dangerous as COVID-19 because it's a great concern for the entire world. But unfortunately, we see certain pandemics as dangerous, but we don't see some of the environmental pandemics, in my opinion, as that dangerous. However, it basically kills much more than a pandemic like what we are experiencing today. Probably not the one we are experiencing this time, but maybe the pandemics we've experienced earlier, SARS-CoV, previous SARS-CoV, and other bird flus and different types of pandemics. So air quality, air pollution is a great concern. And food supply. Now the agriculture is failing. Agriculture is failing due to climate change, irregular weather patterns, heavy rain, too much of rain and too much of drought, and species changed, and they are not adaptive to different climates, different changes in the weather as a result of climate change. So because of that, and then crop damage with flooding and unexpected rains and unexpected drought, and therefore the poverty is increased and food production is decreased, and harvest is lost, harvest is wasted, and therefore there is a worldwide food shortage and malnutrition issue. And the water shortage is another concern. A lot of people around the world, hundreds of millions of people don't have quality, good drinking water, and water scarcity is increased due to climate change as well. And population displacement, this is what we spoke of as climate refugees. Sometimes because of climate disasters and climate change, you have people getting displaced, especially in the African continent. And we have various other diseases like the UV exposure, skin cancer, and different other eye-related and different other skin-related diseases due to climate change. Now, these things we don't really account per se in terms of economic losses to a country, to the health, the burden on the healthcare sector, burden on the families, burden on productive labor. We don't account these. Now, if we account these as well, then we will figure out climate impact is actually billion dollar problem. And in fact, everybody understands a $1 billion. Probably, I would say it's a $1 trillion problem. So we need to really, we don't account a lot of things, some of the impacts of climate change. So we need to start accounting all of these. Now we are very familiar with polar bears, seals, and we are well aware of some of these changes that are happening and some of the scientific detail. Now, I would like to really look at some of the biodiversity impacts of climate change. Now, I will, if you might remember this locust issue that basically decimated croplands from Africa to Pakistan and up to India last year, early part of last year. In fact, in Sri Lanka, our DMC, Disaster Management Center, was preparing that we might also get these locusts, and they are spreading very fast. They are reproducing very fast, and they can travel so fast, and they can decimate millions of hectares of productive croplands in a matter of days. And this is a big problem with these several key biological diversity changes. You might have some dangerous species coming. We'll be speaking of mosquitoes. Mosquitoes is another example. They're spreading to high elevation, much cooler climes now. Not much more cooler climes, I would say. Previously thought much cooler climes because their temperatures have basically increased. And similarly, we will not be speaking of global warming statistics much because you may be very much familiar, but we will look at this graph a little. Now, this is what happens if we continue business as usual. By 2099, that is by 2100, we will have a much warmer planet. And but if we keep within the 2 Celsius degree limit, even that will be very disastrous, but still to a great extent that will be a win. But I think 1.5 would be the best case scenario. We need to be between 1.5. We need to try and reverse whatever possible, but we can't do that by decimating Amazon. We can't do that by ocean acidification. We can't do that by deforestation. We can't do that by desertification. We can't do that by too much of agricultural conversion of productive and environmentally sensitive lands. And now in Sri Lanka, we have seen the climate change and its biodiversity impacts severely over the last few decades. Now, few key species that I want to remind you: dragonflies. Dragonflies were very common in most of our agricultural lands, in our home gardens, and in the environment. But today, dragonflies are not commonly seen because dragonflies are the ones who naturally, this is some very good information for you, are naturally controlling the mosquito population. Dragonflies eat roughly about 100 mosquitoes at a given time. They basically fly for about 20 to 30 minutes and eat about 100 mosquitoes. I have videographed myself a mosquito at my place where I live, eating roughly about 50 mosquitoes on a specific place where there were mosquitoes on one particular evening. in no time. So not only that, dragonflies also control a lot of pests in farmlands. But today, with excessive use of agriculture mainly, and also climate change, we have got our dragonfly population down to a very minimum number, and their diversity is decreased heavily. Similarly, we have the frogs. We have different types of frogs that were commonly seen in wet climes, muddy climes, and especially wet climes, cooler climes, and in places such as Samanala Devia, Sripada Devia, Knuckles, Sringaraj, and everywhere. But today, their populations are decreasing heavily, giving us a very important sign that the climate is changing. Our seasons are changing. If you see this, we call this one on the left Atibukka, and there are different native names for this. And on the right, we have the koha. We call it the koha. Koha comes on Bakmaha season during Aurudu, Sinhala Hindu New Year season. But this year, and most of the years since or late, we don't find them often. That is another sign. And we had the peacocks in the dry zone. Now today, peacocks are everywhere. Peacocks are available in the Horton Plains. They are available in the Knuckles region. They are available in Singaraja. They are available everywhere. So these are clear signs of climate change. And because I spoke of coal, I need to speak about crows as well. Crows are also a sign of climate change, and also they are a sign of they are very important to the health for a healthy ecosystem. Often we speak of most of the other bird species, but we don't speak of this. We don't speak of crows much, probably because we think they are scavengers. They are not that important, but they are actually very important, because we won't have coals if we don't have crows, because crows basically raise the koha's eggs, and they raise the coals until they can sustain themselves. And snails is another sign. They are very sensitive to climate change. We've had different colorful snails in Sri Lanka, but today we find only a few varieties. Our colorful snails are gone. We had pink ones, we had red ones, we had green ones, we had blue ones, we had different colored snails. But today, most of our snails seem to be going extinct very fast. And for some reason, we don't find them quite often, other than a couple of very common varieties. And this is another sign of climate change. And black leopards are basically found in the cool climes and in the shade and in dark forests. But our black leopard population, from the information we get from our resources, our contacts, our community community informants, that the black leopard population where we live was widely available in certain places are no longer the case. They are not there anymore. I mentioned about the mosquitoes. They are climbing up and up and up and going up. Even in Nuwara sometimes mosquitoes are found, which is very strange. And now we also don't find leeches anymore in some of the places that leeches were commonly available, showing us leeches are also very climate sensitive. They are very sensitive to climate, and the cooler climates have changed, and they have gone extinct in certain areas. Still in Singharaj and some part of certain part of Knuckles area, you find them. In Sripada, you find them. But other than that, leeches are also not found in many other ecosystems. They are found in certain cases in some ecosystems, very rarely in certain seasons. But other than that, they are basically also gone. Now we have. We spoke of peacock. Of course, with peacock, we have to speak of foxes. They are also gone pretty much extinct in some of the areas, most of the areas. in wet zone and in rainforest, we used to find them, but anymore, no longer the case. We can't find them easily. They are also gone. So anyway, these are some of the changes in terms of the biodiversity in Sri Lanka, what we have experienced due to climate change. Mostly, we find a drastic reduction of species, a lot of species going extinct, especially the species that are sensitive to the climate change. And as the climate changes, biodiversity changes, their predators either increase, or in certain cases, some of the predators go extinct as well. So having said that, when we speak of greenhouse gas emissions by sectors, this is another important thing. I will take about another 10 minutes. I hope that wouldn't be a problem. Annual greenhouse gas emissions by sector. We have different data. You can have these data: energy development, industrial processes, transportation, agricultural sector, and then land use change. In the sense, once again, it's connected to agriculture and other industrial waste disposal, and residential, in the sense individuals, you and I, are also contributing greatly for the emissions, and we need to be well wary of that. It's not only the agriculture, mass agriculture and companies, industries that we should be blaming. It is individually, we have a big responsibility as well, because we are accounting for more than 10% of course, eventually we are contributing 100%, but directly at our domestic level also we contribute more than 10%. So agriculture, this is a summary of it, a close summary of it. This is how deforestation, agriculture, that is deforestation in terms of land use change, industrial processes and all that contribute. And this is a more descriptive one, but I won't go into this information. Again, in terms of the greenhouse gas composition, we have nitrous oxide almost 6%, methane 16%, carbon dioxide 11%. Carbon dioxide 11% from forestry and other land use, and carbon dioxide from fossil fuel and industrial process 65%. And emissions have increased over time. You can see this increasing emissions. We only have data till 2010 here, but if you analyze the latest data, it is available online through various sources, various credible sources. You will find this as an accelerating trend until 2020. There's some sort of slowdown due to corona, but it will definitely increase. We like I mentioned, carbon dioxide we spoke of with the deforestation, and with the agriculture, with the soil carbon being released. When we do agriculture, soil carbon is something that I've not touched much here, but something separately should be studied, because when the agriculture is done, carbon that gets stored in the soil, when we do the entire soil work, is released back to the atmosphere, and that is a very dangerous trend. And then we have other gases such as methane from the coal mining, landfills, poultry industry, and other industries, especially from animal farming. So therefore, that is why a lot of people say, if you want to be environmentally friendly and not contribute to the emissions that much, to go vegan, or if not to go be a vegetarian, because actually poultry and this livestock industry is contributing immensely to the methane gases, methane composition. And nitrous oxide, our vehicles, electricity production, and various agricultural production contributes. CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, we have addressed this to a great extent, but still, when you have different types of sprays and other sprayers and other different machinery and tools, we still emit some amount of CFCs. But CFC in fridges and other air conditioners and all that have been basically phased out completely, unless they are too old. we basically do deforestation, we cut down trees and all these. Okay, so I come to the last bit of the presentation, last bit of our discussion, and then we can have a question and answer session. What can be done as individuals, as we call individuals are all citizens, as citizens, and then we have corporate citizens that are companies, and we have governments. And of course, we have another sector, which is NGO and other institutions. So we have basically 4 sectors that we can basically list down separately what can be done, but I will mainly look at the governments and individually how we can do. Individually means citizens and corporate citizens, what can we do. Of course, this is a very nice one that let's say, for instance, some say this is a hoax, climate change is a hoax. Let's say it's a hoax. Isn't it bad that we go on renewable energy, we look at green jobs, we look at a better conscious consumption, we look at conserving our resources? It's not a bad thing. So this addresses, even if it's a hoax, as some claim, I think it's a very good idea that we should look at how we can basically address climate change. Now, this is one initiative from Millennium Development Goals to Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015 at Paris Summit, we agreed upon certain things. 3 long-term goals: to keep the temperatures below 2 centigrade, above pre-industrial level, and also to not to increase beyond 1.5 centigrade of pre-industrial levels. And we have adaptation to increase the ability to adapt to the adverse impacts of adaptation. This is adaptation and mitigation. There are different terms used: resilient, climate resilient communities, climate resilient agriculture, climate resilient cities. You have different terms coming up. We can talk about it in the Q&A if required. And there are different practices adopted by countries now to be aligned with the COP and the SDG agenda. Different financing schemes available, and we have the COP26 coming up in Glasgow in UK. So basically, we will be looking at the SDG progresses of different countries. Hopefully, countries are committed through NDCs to address climate change in different sectors would have done greatly on that, while pandemic probably would have slowed down or probably helped, which we will know only through a proper research in Glasgow. And virtually all countries, 160 countries, 63 countries so far, individually committed that they will implement sustainable development goals, which we'll be speaking of in a little bit. Of course, this is a very good one. It's a very comprehensive one. It's a very all stakeholder one. Everybody have to be engaged. No one can't deviate easily. They will have to adhere to the promises made. And even the non-state actors, not only the governments, everybody can participate. So these are the SDGs. I won't be speaking of this. You would have seen enough. But I will look at environmental SDGs. What are the environmental SDGs? There is a little debate on what are the actual environmental SDGs, but I would like to go back to the second one: clean water and sanitation, affordable energy, clean energy that is, responsible consumption, climate action, life below water, life on land as the main sustainable development goals related to the environment. But if you look at sustainable development goals, all 17, only by way of conserving and protecting the environment that you can achieve, or with the proper environmental conservation is where you can achieve all these goals, without which I don't think anything is possible. If you look at good health and well-being, that cannot be achieved without a good environment. Hunger, you cannot absolutely achieve this without a good environment. So we will be speaking of this if required in the Q&A session. I really like this statement made by the Indian Environment Minister just after the COP, on the COP actually, on COP 15. He said, "We have opened a new chapter of hope in the lives of 7 billion people on the planet. We have that is the planet, on loan from future generations. We are on this on a loan. We are indebted. We are on this planet consuming the resources belonging to future generations. So you and I consume what the future generations must own. So must we should make these resources available for them as well. But I don't find a lot of the governments in the world don't really look at that way. They think the development at this moment is all what they're looking at. They're not looking at the future sustainable development, despite sustainable development goals, looking at what gets reported. For instance, the Amazon rainforest fires that gets reported pretty much every year. Okay, so and then controlling of global warming can only be done through reducing deforestation and increasing sustainable agriculture and drastic reduction of consumption of fossil fuel and increased dependence on renewable energy sources, limiting the livestock population, which is very important. We have livestock plenty of times than the entire human population, 7 billion plus. Change and more environmentally compatible lifestyle, and the limiting human population to urban sprawl is one way, and limiting a human population is another way, which David Attenborough always speaks of. And then plenty of other ways, sequestering CO2 in the deep ocean or in the forest or in other form, anything that is possible. And renewable energies, of course, we spoke of wind, solar, best ways. Biomass is something, if you can grow biomass sustainably. And then we have energy and water efficiency. We have to look at energy and water carefully, reduce the consumption of water and energy. And sustainable transportation, look at EV transportation and look at public transportation, look at emission less transportation, and look at sustainable infrastructure, green cities, green building, good urban spaces, good urban gardening, good urban environmental spaces. All that have to be kept in mind. And then we have sustainable agriculture and forest management we should push for. And then we have to push for responsible consumption and recycling. And when we consume, we have to consume local and source from closed areas, not something important from the other part of the world, and not excessive consumption of products, whether it's clothing. Clothing itself is a heavily emission high industry. So is poultry and all that. So we will have to do a lot in terms of governments in changing the adapting to the climate change and ensure our emissions are kept less. And Sri Lanka is looking at 80% of a renewable energy industry by 2030. I think we are well ahead on that, on way for that, except there are a few barriers in terms of Ceylon Electricity Board engineers and some of the people, some of the industry drivers such as coal lobby and all of them are pushing this resisting this. But having said that, I think renewable energy is something that we can easily achieve. But in terms of forest, we have promised 3% of an increase from the COP, but now we have reduced it up to about some small tiny percentage. That's something very worrying, because we said we will increase by 3% at the time the President Maithripala Sirisena, but now the current president's manifesto speak of only 30% of a forest cover, which basically contradicts the previous target that we have promised under our NDC to the international community. So we will have to look at our forest sector, forestry sector. Our transportation sector is another sector. There are plenty of other sectors. Waste is another factor. We need to really be very, very wary of, because as individuals, this is something that we could do. Plastic waste, reducing other waste, and we being energy efficient, we can do a lot of things. You can just have a little look on all these, and we can discuss this in the discussion session. And planting more trees and reforesting, We can create forests, we can protect existing forests as private forests or protected areas by the declaration, declared by the government, or as companies, as corporates. I know a few companies, I can't name these companies in Sri Lanka, venturing into this idea of protecting forests. They are privately buying these forests through different means. Of course, we also have our own forest land trust. We can talk about it if anybody is interested in the Q&A session. Planting more trees, education, and encouraging others to conserve, which is what British Council is doing right now, because awareness is very important. You can know everything, you may know everything, but if you do not spread the knowledge, and if you do not get people involved and make this knowledge available, I think it will be a difficult task. But as long as people know so much about climate change, global warming, and the drivers, and what are these gases, what are the sources, how can you limit, then we can all together stop this global warming and climate change. And conserving water is something very important, because maybe because we have it abundantly, we don't see the importance of it, or we don't care. But water, production of water, and to deliver it to your doorstep, it costs a lot. It costs energy. It has a big transport footprint for most of the people who drink bottled water or purified water or whatever. And production of water has a big energy footprint. And water, especially during droughts, is like gold. So it's much more than, it's much worthy than gold or diamond for that matter. Without water you can't live. Without diamond you can live without problem. So you need to protect, conserve water. And what provides us water is our forests, catchments, and our trees, and we need to protect them. They can't be cut down for whatever the reasons. They need to be protected. So there is no place like home, no place like planet. This is the only place we have. We will not be able to recreate anything like this, and therefore you have to do your part. And let's all together reduce global warming, and we have to start it now. Thank you so much, and let's move on to the Q&A session, and this is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Jayantha. I think that was so much, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing all of that knowledge, because you gave us so much to think about. I want to start where you ended. You said this is home. This is not just our home. This is the home of every single species that inhabit this planet. And it is something that we are doing that is taking away their home.
Yes.
And they cannot go to COP. They cannot, they don't have a voice to raise. They don't speak a language we understand. They speak a language, but not something we understand. So they're the dumb species to us. So I was wondering, because we like to use these programs also not only to raise awareness, but as a call to action, especially to young people, because this is, you and I probably won't be here for too long, but they will be, So what can we do as a call to action for young people to see this as a home for everybody and everything?
Well, very important question. I was hoping to address that on my presentation, and thank you for asking that question, because I was not able to. It was dragging so much in the presentation when I prepared it, so I skipped that. But very important, because we have this mentality that we think of development for humans. Development is exclusively for humans. So when we think of development, we basically ignore everything else. We ignore, let's say, for instance, if it's a road development, we do not think of roadside streams, the life on these streams, aquatic ecosystems, let's say an energy development, something like a mini hydro. We don't think of the aquatic life that is there in the river, but we are looking at the small amount of current, the electricity that can be generated. So what the young generation can do and look at is that start understanding that we exist thanks to all the other important species that are existing in this planet. Our agriculture is not possible if not for pollinators. You can have any amount of agrochemicals, but if there are no natural pollinators, there are species that won't give you fruit. If you don't have bees, once Einstein said, if the bees are extinct, humanity will only survive for 4 years, not no more than that. So these small species have their own role in these ecosystems. So the young, I would say, look at uh, biodiversity and look at inclusive development, inclusive conservation, where you will be able to look at your home garden. That is where you should begin. Look at your home garden. When you look at your home garden, are you planting a plant? I'm not against these plants, but I will tell you a few plants people usually plant. Anthurium. Unless you're doing a business, anthurium does not contribute in any way to biodiversity. You're planting something called bougainvillea. No importance, nothing at all for wildlife. Planting what something called Vatusuddha, something foreign, something alien to us, no importance, no service for ecosystems. But instead, if you start planting something like, let's say, some of our native, some of our good plant species like Balunakuta, it has beautiful flowers, something like that. And then we start planting something like Akkapana, which is a beautiful plant. We can start planting Komarika, very good, and it has some specific ecosystem service. It basically absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide as well, good to keep indoor as well. So we have our own native set of plants, bee friendly plants. We can easily plant bee friendly plants. I have plenty of them at my space, 6.78 purchases, lot of bee friendly plants. You can have flowering plants so that bees can come. So my point, number one, look at your home garden. How are you contributing to the urban wildlife if you are in an urban area, or wildlife altogether if you are in a rural area? Number two, your consumption. What are you consuming? Are you consuming something emission high product, or are you consuming emission low product? Are you consuming wasteful products, waste less products? Are you, once you consume something, are you producing a lot of waste, or you're not producing waste at all? When you go to shopping, are you reducing waste at the shopping experience? Are you carrying your bag? How are you doing your transportation? Obviously you won't be able to take public transportation now, but you can, if the situation, when the situation is normal, you should take public transportation as much as possible, or carpool, or find a group of people to work, or things like that. So you can do a lot of things. Reducing electricity usage, very easy, and it's a very high emission area. And then water, and then your transportation footprint, and your waste footprint, which I spoke of earlier. So these are different footprints you can really look at. And as young people, this is where you have to begin your life, because if you do not change, you can't change a lot of things. You can't change your school, you can't change your company, you can't change a lot of things. I recently shared something very important. Finally, this concept was promoted at a hotel in Sri Lanka. I won't name the hotel. They have something called waste free day. They put up a notice saying no bin day. You don't have a bin today. You have to serve only what you can eat, nothing more. You don't have a bin. So you can't, either you'll have to carry your plate back home, or you'll have to go somewhere out and find a dustbin and put it there, or something like that. So anyway, these are little concepts you can start at home, and then promote it to school, speak to your friends, get your small circle organized, start up a small society at your society, at your village, at your school, at your company. You can do a lot of things. I think that is where you should begin. You should begin at your home.
Thank you. I mean, that's a lot to think about and a lot to actually action and doable. Thank you, Jayantha, because those are, I mean, every little step helps, and you broke it down right to the bottom for people if they really want to do something. We have a question that says there are many efforts underway to curb or control in different sectors. Cradle to cradle philosophies need to be encouraged. Of course, there's a trade-off economically. What's your take on it? This is as opposed to cradle to grave mentality. I don't,
Uh,
the question is not too
Mrinali,
clear to me, but yeah.
Mrinali, I lost you a little there. Can you repeat me the
Yeah.
question, please?
It says there are many efforts underway to
Okay.
curb or control in different sectors. Cradle to cradle philosophies need to be encouraged as opposed to, a trade off economically.
Yes. Well, it's like this. Now, we have different efforts in terms of nationally by way of NDC, nationally determined contributions,
Mm.
which 163 countries produced and presented. Nationally, there are different efforts. And this covers the transportation, this covers the energy production, this covers the agriculture, this covers the forestry sector, this covers um, waste management and different sectors. So, but the point is this. Sometimes when you look at, except in the energy development sector, I find the other sectors are not moving enough forward as expected. And economically, if you really plan, if you really look at different efforts that are underway in different sectors, some people may argue it is more costlier to be sustainable, and some people argue it is more economically viable to be sustainable. But in simple, what I have to say is that, well, going sustainable, any industry, the investments made on sustainable production and sustainable development is an investment for future generations. If you look at the opportunity cost or the other costs that are involved, the indirect costs, we call it the hidden costs, and now let's say, for instance, the energy development sector. A lot of people say going green, going renewable energy is much costlier, right? And they say solar, you have to pay 21 rupees per unit, and it is costlier. And that, whereas we can have 6 rupee of a unit generated from, or 8 rupee of a unit generated from coal, where we ignore the hidden and indirect costs and the impacts on the environment, health sector, and other aspects of our day-to-day life. So I think in that sense, if you really do economic calculations in almost all these sectors, whatever the investments that are done on the sustainable development and initiatives in terms of sustainability on different sectors are actually economically long-term viable, and that have been proven all around the world through various research. Even in Sri Lanka, it has been proven in terms of energy development sector, it has been proven in terms of transportation, electric vehicle sector, it has been proven in many sectors, because it is economically economically viable, and it is actually very good. But unfortunately, I must say finally that although there are different initiatives taken, some of the sectors are limited only for initiatives. On the ground level, things don't really move forward.
Well, I suppose that's a conversation, and that's the problem that countries are facing right across the planet.
Yes.
This is kind of, we are still sort of getting our mind into this.
Yes. Yes.
There is also a rather long comment and a question. I'm going to read it out. As you mentioned, it's very important to acknowledge people on climate change and on reducing pollution. So people in rural areas need to be acknowledged as well in terms of limiting their use of insecticides or pesticides. If you consider, even for the elephant, human conflict is due to the habitat loss and fragmentation. But it would be very hard to communicate to people um, d-
Pretty.
I think dealing with current inflation rate in the country and also in front of a pandemic situation. What do you think best approaches to communicate the importance of environmental conservation and the dangers of climate change to such communities?
Well, I would say putting things into context is the best way, because we have failed to put things into context to make people understand a certain concept. Um, because like I mentioned, it is, if you look at the previous question also very well pointed out that there are trade-offs. Now sometimes people might, how we basically convince people now these sustainable initiatives are much more beneficial in the long run than investing in cheaper unsustainable means of development. So here it's the same. Insecticides and pesticides, I think in this aspect we have moved far ahead in terms of government policy, as everybody would know, despite various protests all across the country, which has died down now. Hopefully will not start again when the pandemic is over, because it's a very good initiative to limit agrochemicals and pesticides and all of that, and encourage organic and more environmentally friendly solutions, because that is what we lived on up to 1960s and early part of 1970s, when tobacco cultivation came to Sri Lanka. Only the tobacco farmers were given the pesticides and the fertilizers, and that is where we started using these fertilizers in a big scale. So we had that system earlier, and we still have our natural organic ways and means of doing it. So the government, now to answer this question, government is currently having an advertising campaign. We would have seen on the TV that they are giving 12,500 rupees of a monetary financial allowance to anyone who would be willing to produce organic fertilizer and pesticides. So, in convincing, even during a pandemic situation, I thought something very positive about. Yes, there are negatives, there are disagreements with what in terms of government policies in different sectors, but in this sector, in terms of agriculture sector, the pesticide and the agrochemical topic, they are in the right direction in convincing people. They are already doing. They are giving financial allowance. They are registering the farmers. They are trying to give a assured price cap for each kilo sold using the organic farmed using the organic fertilizer and all that. So yeah, so I think the best approach would be to communicate the importance of conservation, is to make them understand, if not, the cost we are incurring. It is very clear we are giving the fertilizer subsidy, we are giving pesticides and all of that, and the cost of farming has increased, in fact quadrupled over the last 20 years, cost of farming, and the harvest has not quadrupled per se. So the beneficiaries eventually are the companies who are producing these, so that you to ensure that their health benefits when they don't have chronic kidney disease, cancers and other diseases, how much of money the entire country and they will be saving, and their impact, they are saving
Yeah,
and
climate is not
environmental
something you can look
improvement
at.
and their
Yeah,
economic.
yeah. Climate is not something you can look at in a silo, right? You have to have a holistic view. It's not, and it's beyond borders. It's beyond species. It's all of us, right? On this one
Yes,
place, as you
yes,
ended your presentation by saying. So it's all of us get
yes,
impacted. Um, I think we've kept you a long time, Jayantha, and we've kept you talking a long time, and you must be exhausted. So, I just have one idea that I was wondering whether it was a good one. You mentioned the SDGs, and in a previous experience, we were encouraged to adopt an SDG, like a little
yes,
mantra, a personal mantra to live by, saying
yes,
this SDG will apply to my way of living. So, for me, I picked number 12, which was responsible consumption, because for me, I
yes,
felt that as an
yes,
individual, that I would have the best impact. Is that something
yes.
also we can encourage children to do, like to look at the SDGs and see how it translates and how they can? You think that's a good idea or not?
It is a very good idea actually. Now, but I need to just emphasize something briefly on the 17 SDGs. If you look at, like I mentioned, as individuals, we can do a lot. But if you look at look at good health and environment, good
Yes.
health and well-being. Number three. Now,
Right.
if your land where you live, your household is a healthy environment where you have good air to breathe, good
Mm.
water to drink, and a good environment for your eyesight, your brain, your mind is calmed down when you're in a green environment where you have plants and all of that. It's very good. So therefore, you can improve your health, well-being, and mental capacity and your memory and all that with a greener environment. So make your home garden, your home greener, cleaner place. Number one, and then your clean water. When you use water, we waste a lot of water. How can just see how can you basically find ways to purify this water or reuse this water? You're probably your bathroom water from your bathroom that you're wasting. There are ways and means now domestically. You can purify them and use for different purposes. You can do that at home easily. Your energy, you can easily put up a solar panel at your home. This is very important. Let me take 1 minute. I checked with recently with a bank. They have an amazing scheme where they give 5 megawatt of a unit, 5 kilowatt of a unit for something less than 1 million. And you have a great financial loan scheme also. But having said that, all I wanted to say is that 5 kilowatt of a unit is far greater than what you actually need, and you can provide electricity to the grid and be benefited. Like you can get about 10,000 rupees monthly. So look at, if you can, if possible, whether you can invest in renewable energy, especially on a rooftop solar. And sustainable cities. Now if you are living in a city, can you see what sort of, probably a mango tree, probably some fruit tree that you can, small fruit tree that you can plant, which can provide fruits to various different species, birds, even monkeys are found even in my area where I live. So yes, there are plenty of different areas. But as you said, the easiest place to begin is your consumption. What you consume, what you eat, what you wear. What you wear is very important, and whether you're using them sustainably and responsibly. And look at what you're wasting. I'll give you one example. I personally have not given any organic waste to our garbage truck for the last 1 year at least. I live in a 6.7 purchase land. I have a small organic, what do you call not a
Compost.
recycle bin, a small
A
compost bin,
composter.
not a
Yeah.
compost bin either, made out of, composter made out of Glaciers sticks, where natural air can come, no odor or no bad smell or nothing. I have not given my organic waste. I have probably given every 3 months a very small amount of plastic and polythene. Everything else I put it in a eco brick, in a sense, a plastic bottle, and compact it and keeping it here. Now there are places who buys these, or who receives, who I don't know whether they are paying, they are getting
Doesn't
these
matter. Yeah.
eco bricks. So lot of things in terms of consumption you can do. Yes, consumption is the easiest place to begin. Water, air, energy, rather air pollution. Don't contribute to air pollution by burning things. That is what I wanted to say. Air, water, and land. One final thing. When we build homes, our home gardens, don't concrete it. Keep 60. There is a low 60-40 rule. 60% is the buildable area, 40% is the rainwater drainage area or environmental service area. What we do is, like, we build in 60%, rest of the area we either interlock or either concrete it. Don't do that, because you will be depleting groundwater immensely. Colombo has a severe groundwater issue now because of this problem, concreting of everything, and rainwater is unnecessarily going down on the drains to the ocean. Thanks.
Thank you, Jayantha. I can keep you till 8 o'clock talking, but I think I will have to let you go. It has been such a pleasure, and thank you. You have been so kind, because you have taken all this trouble to share so much with us. And I'm sure people will probably be reaching out to your organization also to sort of find out more, and maybe take action. I'm sorry, I have the whole list of questions. I haven't even touched them. That's all right. Maybe we can do another program in the future. So
Yes.
thank you very much, Jayantha, from the British Council. Thank you for all of this. And I
Uh,
also want to, sorry, yes, did you want to say something?
yeah, no, no, just go on. Say, I will finally
Okay.
say
Okay, all right. And I've also wanted to thank my colleague Manika van der Putten because she is the one who made the introduction for this program. And to everybody who is keen on the planet and keen on knowing more about climate change at COP26 and all these activities we have been doing and programs, they're all available on YouTube and on our Facebook page. So please go and look them up because you will learn a lot and it will help you to take action as well and make up your mind actually how you want to take action. Look out for other events in the future. And we have to thank Sajid, who's behind the scenes always and such a great support. Thank you, Sajid. And I'll give you the last word, Jayantha.
thank you so much. Thank you, Mrinali, and thank you, Manika, like you very correctly mentioned, as Sajid and everyone who's behind the scene. And thank you for inviting me to speak on this session. And I hope this is very interesting. And like you mentioned, I'm from Rainforest Protectors of Sri Lanka. You can go to our website and have a little look at what we do. And we also have a land trust where we buy forests. If anyone interested in buying forests, just go to rainforestprotectorstrust.org, where we have a separate trust to buying rainforest lands, rainforests under private ownership. And you can reach me through the contact details on the Rainforest Protectors of Sri Lanka. And looking forward to connecting with you very soon, and hope you will start from your home and start doing your bit to curtail and address the most, probably the issue of the century, global warming and climate change. Thank you so much, and have a pleasant evening.
Thank you, Jayantha. Thank you, everyone, for watching and being with us throughout the program. Stay safe and stay well. Good night. Good
Good
night.
night.